Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this invisible tug of war that really dictates almost everything, from trade deals to global conflicts. We're going to give you one simple but really powerful idea that helps make sense of a world that, let's be honest, often feels pretty chaotic. So, let's jump right in. You ever get that feeling that the old rules just don't apply anymore? I mean, for decades, there was this system, Bretton Woods, that tried to keep things stable. But as the scholar Robert Gilpin pointed out, that system, well, it's been crumbling for a while. And in its place, we've got what feels like just constant chaos, both in our markets and in our politics. So what is really going on here?
The key to unlocking all this complexity, to really understanding our modern world, it comes down to one fundamental conflict. It's a constant, never-ending tug of war between two massive forces: the state, which is all about politics, and the market, which is all about economics. And this tension, this is the very heart of what we call international political economy. Okay, first up, a world in flux. To really get this conflict, we have to understand the world it's playing out in. And that's a world where the old economic order is under enormous strain.
So think about it like this. Our entire world is basically built on two competing blueprints. On one side, you have the state, the political unit, the country that organizes our societies. And on the other, you have the market, the economic engine that fuels our lives. Now, they grew up together, but as we're about to see, they speak completely different languages. Section 2, the two opposing forces. All right, let's break down exactly what these two sides are, and more importantly, what they fundamentally want, because this is where the sparks really start to fly.
Okay, so here's the essential clash. The state is all about territory. Its power is defined by its borders, and it uses that power to control what happens inside them. But the market, it's the exact opposite. It could not care less about borders. It is built for one thing: efficiency, chasing profit wherever it can find it. So you could say the state wants to build walls, and the market wants to tear them all down. So what happens when the borderless, globe-trotting market slams right into the territorial, power-hungry state? Well, you get a collision. And that collision pretty much defines modern history.
And here's the state's motivation in a nutshell. This quote from Robert Hilbrunner just nails it. The logic of the state is to capture and control the process of economic growth. So while the market is just out there creating wealth, the state looks at that energy, and its first instinct is to grab it and use it for its own national goals, for its own power. And this sets off this incredibly powerful chain reaction that we see again and again. First, the market expands, right? It's always hunting for cheaper resources and new customers, and it just plows right across borders. As it does that, it starts to reorganize society itself, turning things like land and even our jobs into commodities with a price tag. Now, this process naturally creates winners and losers, shifting wealth around in huge ways. And that, right there, forces a political response. States have to step in. They have to intervene to try and protect their people from the market's relentless and often very disruptive drive. This endless clash, this push and pull, it brings us to three timeless debates. These are the essential questions that people have been wrestling with for centuries. The first big question: does a global market create harmony, or does it just create more conflict? In other words, does trading with each other make us all friends, or does it just give us new ways to compete and new vulnerabilities to exploit? Second, what's the real link between economic and political change? Is it a one-way street? Do these huge economic shifts actually drive things like revolutions and wars? Or is it politics, the decisions of leaders and nations, that ultimately shape the economy? It's a real chicken and egg problem. And third, what's the bottom line for an individual country? I mean, is plugging into the global market an engine for growth and prosperity? Or does it end up hollowing out your industries and leading to exploitation? Almost every single debate we have about globalization today boils right down to this very question. All right, let's put this whole framework into action. We can see it playing out so clearly in the massive global shifts that were happening back when the scholar Robert Gilpin was first writing about all this in the 1980s. He pointed to three huge developments. First, America's iron grip, its unquestioned economic dominance after World War II, was starting to slip. Second, you could feel the world's economic center of gravity literally shifting, moving away from the Atlantic and over to the Pacific. And third, something totally unprecedented was happening. The US and Japanese economies were merging in a way nobody had ever seen before. And the scale of this was just stunning. This new US-Japan economic powerhouse, sometimes called the Nichibei economy, accounted for a staggering 30% of all global output. This wasn't just a minor tweak. A whole new economic center for the entire planet was being forged. And this gets to the heart of how a state uses the market for political power. Because the US dollar was the world's main currency, America got what French President Charles de Gaulle famously called its extravagant privileges. It could basically print money to finance its global military and political standing in a way no one else could. It was pure political advantage, maintained through an economic tool, and it depended on partners like Japan to keep that system going.
So, when you boil it all down, it really comes to this. From the price of gas to our biggest geopolitical alliances, almost every major event we see is shaped by this tug of war. If you can learn to see the competing logics, the territorial state versus the borderless market, you have this incredibly powerful lens to see our world with a brand new clarity.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you. As we face today's challenges, climate change, pandemics, the rise of new global powers, think about this conflict. Right now, in the 21st century, who do you think is winning the tug of war? Is it the state or is it the market? Thanks for watching The Explainer.